Brother cheated with my fiancée on the day of my engagement and my family took his side, so I cut them off completely. 5 years later they're calling me with bad news and oh boy, I never thought karma would strike back so bad. So I, 29 male, recently got a call from my mother who I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years, saying that she needed my help because my brother and his wife had just been through a tragedy. For context, the woman who is now my brother's wife was actually supposed to be my wife once upon a time. My brother, 27 male, I'll call him Marcus, hooked up with my fiancée Lucy, 29 female, on the day of my engagement. Lucy and I had been together since college, and she proposed to me after almost 5 years of being together. She'd thrown a party for us to surprise me on the night of our engagement. And I still remember feeling like I was on top of the world until around 10 p.m. when I decided to go out into the backyard for a better reception and caught my brother all over Lucy there. They were making out so passionately that for the first couple of seconds, they didn't even notice me standing there with my mouth wide open. I couldn't believe that she was doing this to me after almost 5 years of togetherness and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally did take note of me, they broke apart instantly, but it was too late. I made a run for it, got into my car and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel that I could find. I was hyperventilating because I was so shocked at what I had witnessed. I was somehow trying to process it and willing it to be untrue. But then I received a text from Marcus saying that he was sorry, but he was in love with Lucy. And apparently, this had been going on for a really long time now. I was in the hotel room when I received that text, and I broke down like never before. After Marcus, Lucy texted me pretty much the same thing and said that she had only proposed because she felt that if she committed to me, then she would be able to push Marcus out of her head. Obviously, that hadn't worked, and it made her want Marcus even more. She told me that it wasn't about me, but this was about them, and they just knew that they were meant to be. I was just a placeholder in the way for Lucy to finally meet Marcus. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days and tried to put my act together because I was still feeling crazy and trying to force myself to believe that this was just a cruel prank that life was playing on me. After almost 4 days, I finally went back home because I did need to collect my stuff and rejoin work if I didn't want to get fired. When I showed up at home, I realized that my family had been living with Lucy under the same roof, waiting for me to come back. It would almost be touching had it not been for the circumstances under which I left. Everybody had been trying to text me and get me to respond relentlessly after I disappeared, but I hadn't replied to a single one of those texts. So needless to say, there was a lot of chaos when I finally came back and everybody made a point to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Marcus had the audacity to come to me and give me a giant hug with tears in his eyes when he saw me. I was too disorientated to even react to that and just stood there like a silent statue while everyone clamored around me. Then finally, once everybody had calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was back only to take my things and move out for good. Lucy had just been standing there without a word until that point. But when I said that I was going to move out, she announced that there was no need for me to leave because she'd already packed her stuff and was going to move in with Marcus since now everything was out in the open anyway. My family, my parents, my aunt, my dad's youngest sister who has lived in the same house ever since her husband passed away, actually had wide smiles on their faces even though there was nothing to smile about, at least not according to me. Marcus was standing beside Lucy in an awkward side hug and looked at me very sadly, but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to ask my family what the heck they were even smiling about. Because as far as I was concerned, Marcus had just broken up my engagement and stolen my girlfriend of almost 5 years. There was really nothing very funny or sweet about this. My mother chose to speak up at that point and told me that they couldn't go back in time and change the past, but they could accept the future. And they knew that the future had Marcus and Lucy together in it. Granted, it was a relationship that had formed out of cheating, and they did feel sorry about it. But they also wanted me to understand and accept that this was for the best. Marcus said that he was very sorry for taking my girlfriend away from me, but he couldn't help falling in love with her. He wished that he could have told me earlier and I didn't have to find out this way, but apparently, they were madly in love and wanted to spend their lives with each other. Then the two of them kissed right in front of me, and my mother had the audacity to even wipe a tear from her eye. I snapped and told them that this wasn't supposed to be sentimental or emotional, and that what they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family seemed to get annoyed with my behavior and told me that I was being too bratty about the situation. Instead of being happy for my brother, I was making this all about myself, and they didn't approve of my behavior. I was stunned by their attitude about this, and told them all to get the heck out of my house that very moment. I couldn't, for the life of me, understand how they were defending what Marcus and Lucy had done while making me out to be the bad guy and act as though I was overreacting. My father intervened and told me not to act like a child because these things happen, and I should take it in my stride. He wanted me to celebrate that my brother had finally found his soulmate instead of being jealous of him. They were literally all acting insane, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I just said, screw it. Went into my room, packed some of my things, and left yet again without even speaking to them or waiting to hear them out, even as they called out my name and told me not to go. I really didn't have anything left to say to them because it was very clear to me that they cared about Marcus and his happiness than about me, or even about what was right and wrong. They were so caught up in trying to justify what Marcus had done that they completely forgot that I was also a human being with real feelings as well. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded to them because I didn't think that I owed it to them. Couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Marcus and Lucy's wedding, which I declined, obviously. All the common friends that Lucy and I had also declined the wedding invitation in solidarity with me. And even a couple of relatives who knew the truth refused to interact with my family after they learned how they had treated me in the aftermath of the party. It's been 5 years, and I pretty much cut them out of my life entirely. They occasionally tried to weasel their way back into my life by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignore them. I never even blocked any of them, even though I did remove them from my following and friends list. But since I have a public account, they could see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see, and I wanted them to know that I was leading a fabulous life and keep burning with jealousy. It was petty, but it was the least I could do after how they screwed me over. And up until recently, I barely even had a clue of what they'd been up to in the last couple of years. My mother called me about 4 days ago from a number that I didn't have saved. When I answered the call and realized that it was my mom on the other end, I immediately tried to hang up. But she begged me desperately for one chance to talk to me because apparently they were in dire need of help. And I agreed to talk to her for just a couple of minutes, but only because she sounded so upset. And my humanity didn't allow me to turn my back on her at that moment. She told me that Marcus and Lucy had started a business of their own a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. And their investors were all backing out because they were failing to make any profit at all. So they borrowed more money, but even that didn't help their business. And now they were neck deep in debt. And the loan sharks were all after them. They were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. My mother knew that I lived a luxurious lifestyle and could afford to help them out. So she had turned to me as a last resort and was begging me to help them out by loaning them some money so they could pay off their debts. And it was no small amount either that she was asking me for. It was almost $75,000 that she wanted me to give her so she could help Marcus and Lucy out. I asked her why wasn't Marcus calling me if he needed help, and why was she making my mother speak to me on his behalf. So my mother told me that Marcus and Lucy didn't even know that she was coming to me for help as they had given her strict instructions not to approach me. Because I guess we all still remember exactly what happened 5 years ago. Marcus didn't want me to know any of this and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anybody else who would have that kind of money and would give it to them at the drop of a hat. A couple of months had already passed, and Marcus and Lucy were struggling to even put food on the table. My parents were helping them all they could. And even Lucy's family were trying to give them all that they possibly could, but it was just not enough. And even they had to be able to support themselves in the future. So it was impossible for them to just give away all the money that they'd saved over the years, especially because most of my family was retired and so were Lucy's parents, and that's why my mother with no other option left had called me to request me for help. Now I could afford to help them out, but I really didn't want to. Marcus was right for not contacting me to ask for help. They'd lost the right to make any demands from me the day that they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. My mother sounded very upset and told me that I was being cruel and I needed to think about my family. I told her that Marcus and Lucy hadn't thought about me when they had that affair, and neither did my family think about me while they were supporting the two of them. So right now, there was no need for me to think about them either. I'd worked hard to get to the position where I am today, and I wasn't about to just go and drop $75,000 on two people who didn't even deserve it. My mother then began to cry on the phone and told me that she had never expected me to grow up to be so selfish and claimed that my brother and his wife would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I said that it was just too bad, but I couldn't help them. And then I hung up. Since then, my mother has been sending me several texts every hour begging me to reconsider and think about my brother for once. She said that this was not the time for petty revenge and that the trouble that Marcus was in was very serious. So if I didn't help him now, I really would regret it in the future. She's being crazy, and I don't understand what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad guy here either. Ida for not helping my brother out financially after he stole my fiancée 5 years ago. Update 1. So I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because, A, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous of me, and B, because I thought that cutting them off entirely could be something that I would regret in case something bad were to happen to them. But I don't really care now. I should have removed them 5 years ago. I don't understand why I even kept them around so long. That is what was petty of me. Refusing to help my brother out now isn't petty. It's just a logical thing to do. They'd already wasted tons and tons of money, and I'm sure that even if I give them the money right now, they won't be able to repay it. And $75,000 is a pretty big amount. So I might be well off, but that doesn't mean I can just drop that sort of money and not expect it back. If this was a close friend of mine who I was helping, I still would expect that money back. And here, these are neither people who are close to me nor my loved ones, nor can I expect them to pay me back. So there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I told a couple of my friends about this too to get their opinion on it, and they agreed that I'd done the right thing by refusing to give them the money. Not even out of a feeling of revenge, but mostly because it was completely impractical and stupid to even expect me to help them when they were the ones who had screwed me over in the past. But anyway, my mother is blocked now, and she can't contact me to guilt trip me anymore. So I have nothing to worry about. Update 2. Hi, guys. So something really big happened today. I was at work when I received a call from my neighbor saying that there was a couple outside my house who was screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor told me that they seemed pretty crazy and had been screaming at the door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her for a description of them, but in my heart, I already knew who it was. She told me how they looked, and it just confirmed that I was indeed going to run into Marcus and Lucy when I got back home. My neighbor told me that I needed to come back and deal with this because she didn't think that these two were up to any good. And I agreed when it was Marcus and Lucy that we were talking about, they could never be up to any good. So I thanked her and started driving back home immediately because I couldn't risk them getting into my house at any cost. I got there in about 15 minutes, luckily, and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and asked them what the hell they thought they were doing. And then I tried to call the police immediately, but Lucy was as quick as lightning, and she rushed over to me and knocked the phone out of my hand. Marcus also walked over to me and told me that they were here just to talk, and they didn't want anything from me, not at the moment at least. I told them to make it quick and also said that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside, so whatever they had to talk about had to be discussed out there in the yard. They seemed to be okay with that, which was a relief because I really didn't think that it would be a good idea to invite those two inside close quarters. They already seemed pretty hostile, so I didn't know what to expect since they'd said they didn't want anything from me. Marcus started talking and told me that my mother had told him about the phone call and how I'd ignored the subsequent texts from her and then even blocked them all. He told me that the way I was behaving was very unfair and that it had been 5 years since then, so I should really be over it by now. Instead, I was resorting to such silly and dramatic acts just to get a little bit of attention from my family. He said that he felt very insulted because of how I had refused to help them, and that's what he was here to talk to me about. He said that he'd been able to arrange the money for now, but there was a very strong chance that he might need more in the future. And because he'd sold their house and all their jewelry to get the money this time, he obviously couldn't do that again. And so he had to know that he could fall back on me and rely on me for help when he needed it. I told him that, no, he couldn't, and he must not count on me at all under any circumstances because I hate him and his wife with a passion. I was so angry that I also told him that it was taking me a lot of restraint to not hit him at the moment. So it would be in their best interest to just leave. Lucy had the audacity to say that they weren't going anywhere until I signed a document that would confirm that I would give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I mean, it wouldn't even be valid if I was forced to sign it under pressure. I'm pretty sure there are laws against it. And also, they must be insane if they actually thought that they could manipulate me into signing something like that. I told both of them to get the hell out, and Marcus pushed me saying that I had to help them because apparently, I owe this to them since they were family, and I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was shocked that he'd actually pushed me and I was about to slap him, but I controlled the urge to do that because things would only get worse if I got violent. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Lucy knocked it out of my hand and made a run for it. I climbed into my car as quickly as I could and then drove off without even bothering to check my rearview mirror. I hadn't bothered to shut off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running and it didn't take me much time to get a head start on them. Obviously, they were not stupid enough to chase after me on foot, so they just waited there at my house, which was pretty unfortunate. As soon as I was a safe distance away from them, I decided to call the police and tell them what was going on, and then I drove back to my house just in the nick of time before the police had already arrived within 20 minutes. I filled them in on everything, and they arrested and took Marcus and Lucy away. I knew that the charges weren't that serious, and they would get off pretty easily. But it was still worth it because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to waste any more of my time with them. It's been a couple of hours since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange because I'd figured out that by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from some other numbers, but they haven't. So I'm guessing that they're either just over everything and not going to try and get under my skin again, or they're just waiting it out and biding their time so they can contact me later when things are a little less tense. Update 3. Hi. So the last update was about a week ago, and I'd honestly started to believe that my family was actually not going to bother me again because I had called the cops on Marcus and Lucy, but I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from disturbing me yet again. And this time, it was my parents who showed up at my house asking me if they could speak to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed a lot less cocky and arrogant compared to Marcus and Lucy, so I let them in. My mother started crying pretty much as soon as she entered the house and told me how sorry she was that she'd ever taken Marcus's side over mine. My father told me that after they learned of Marcus and Lucy being arrested because of their behavior, and also that they had physically pushed me, they couldn't bring themselves to look at them the same way and had decided that they were going to cut them off. My mother continued to cry throughout the time that she was here while my father explained that they were apologetic for siding with Marcus in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. While I said that I did appreciate them for finally coming to their senses, but right now, it was too little and too late for things to get better. I was used to living my life on my own terms now, and I didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. So as much as I appreciated their visit and apology to me, I really couldn't promise them that I would work on this relationship because I just didn't feel that there was any point in trying to salvage an already ruined relationship. Even if it is with my parents, they protested a little at that point and said that we could fix this if we wanted to, but that was exactly where the problem was. I didn't want to anymore, I just wanted to be by myself. That's all. And I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done here. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually, they left and asked me if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I have unblocked my parents, which feels weird. But, yeah, I guess that's it.